Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to be talking about Rule 4, which is compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. And I think the principles in this chapter can be eye-opening to some people because in the modern day world, we're taught that you have to compete against everybody else. And what I really like from Peter Thiel, a famous entrepreneur, was competition is for losers because you should be competing against yourself, but you should be taking valuable information from other people so you can learn from other people, but you're not continuously looking at that other person in direct competition with them. You're just taking what works for you and applying that to your life and then bettering yourself every single day. And so on page 89, he goes on to say, when we are very young, we are neither individual nor informed. We have not had the time nor gained the wisdom to develop our own standards. In consequence, we must compare ourselves to others because standards are necessary. Without them, there is nowhere to go and nothing to do. As we mature, we become, by contrast, increasingly individual and unique. The conditions of our lives become more and more personal and less comparable with those of others. Symbolically speaking, this means we must leave the house ruled by our Father and confront the chaos of our individual being. We must take note of our disarray without completely abandoning that Father in the process. We must then rediscover the values of our structure. Veiled from us by our ignorance, hidden in the dusty treasure trove of the past, rescue them and integrate them into our lives. This is what gives existence its full and necessary meaning. So let me stop there and just simply talk about what he means here by the Father and abandoning the Father in the process. Growing up, the father, the masculine role is control. That's where order is. So your father is supposed to get the best out of you. You know, a mother role is to be nurturing and to uplift you if you make a mistake and to give you, the proper encouragement to go out. And then the father is supposed to instill discipline, character, and he's supposed to be more straightforward, a more brutal force, so that you can get it through your head that there are some places that you need to make adjustments for the betterment of you and your future. It's the whole principle of good cop, bad cop. As long as there's one parent playing the good role, the other one can do their job and instill discipline and be truthful without that child reciprocating back in a negative way. It'll be balanced out. So moving on, he says, who are you? You think you know, but maybe you don't. You are, for example, neither your own master nor your own slave. You cannot easily tell yourself what to do and compel your own obedience, any more than you can easily tell your husband, wife, son, or daughter what to do and compel theirs. You are interested in some things and not in others. You can shape that interest, but there are limits. Some activities will engage you and others simply will not. You have a nature. You can play the tyrant to it, but you will certainly rebel. How hard can you force yourself to work and sustain your desire to work? How much can you sacrifice to your partner before generosity turns to resentment? What is it that you actually love? What is it that you genuinely want? Before you can articulate your own standards of value, you must see yourself as a stranger, and then you must get to know yourself. What do you find valuable or pleasurable? How much leisure, enjoyment, and reward do you require so that you feel like more than a beast of burden? How must you treat yourself so you won't kick over the traces and smash up your own coral. You could force yourself through your daily grind and kick your dog in frustration when you come home. You could watch the precious days tick by, or you could learn how to entice yourself into sustainable, productive activity. Do you ask yourself what you want? Do you negotiate fairly with yourself, or are you a tyrant with yourself as slave? When do you dislike your parents, your spouse, or your children, and why? What might be done about that? What do you need and want from your friends and your business partners? This is not a mere matter of what you should want. I'm not talking about what other people require from you or your duties to them. I'm talking about determining the nature of your moral obligation to yourself. Should might enter into it because you are nested within a network of social obligations. Should is your responsibility and you should live up to it. But this does not mean you must take the role of lapdog, obedient and harmless. That's how a dictator wants his slaves. So let me stop here and just talk about what he's really meaning, because to some people that might sound narcissistic when he's suggesting that you refocus your aim on yourself. But it has to do with the principle that Ayn Rand talks about, how if everyone had the moral obligation to do the right thing themselves, to focus on themselves, to become better every single day, then that would have an exponential ripple effect over society. Because nowadays, everybody is climbing to move up the ladder. And in order to climb up the ladder, so to speak, to move up the dominance hierarchy, you have to have authority, you have to have influence. And so, what competitive nature is telling everybody is to learn how to be a leader, learn how to tell everybody else how to do their job, learn how to tell everybody else what to do, to micromanage. But that's not always effective, because the more you start putting emphasis on other people, the less you're developing yourself. Some of the best leaders are those who went through a prolonged period of personal development and then they learned how to always keep themselves in check. And then naturally, people followed them. There's a difference between a boss and a leader. A leader is somebody that people enjoy going to work for or listening to. So a lot of people are going to jobs that they don't really want to go to because the boss is there. You see, people don't quit organizations because of the work. Now, granted, there are some exceptions. People usually quit organizations because of the people, more specifically, because of the people in charge. So it is in your best interest to become a better leader. So he goes on to say, dare instead to be dangerous, dare to be truthful, dare to articulate yourself and express, or at least become aware of, what would really justify your life. If you allowed your dark and unspoken desires for your partner, for example, to manifest themselves, if you were even willing to consider them, you might discover that they were not so dark, giving the light of day. You might discover instead that you were just afraid and so pretending to be moral. You might find that getting what you actually desire would stop you from being tempted and straying. Are you so sure that your partner would be unhappy if more of you rose to the surface? The femme fatale and the anti-hero are sexually attractive for a reason. And so I really like what he's saying in this. He's saying, are you so sure that other people would reciprocate in a negative manner if you were more truthful, if you were a little bit more blunt with yourself and with other people? I think what you'll find is that other people will appreciate that. Maybe not right away, they might be shocked by it, but they would appreciate it. And so if you think about some reasons why you might not be truthful to yourself and to other people, it has to do with groupthink. It has to do with the fact that we are very comfortable in a social environment where we feel like we're getting along with other people. And because of that need, some people are going to sacrifice their own personal development and a career advancement because they're going to be self-conscious to the point where they're not going to rock the boat too much. And so if you look at some of the best leaders in the corporate environment, for example, or even, let's make this more interesting and talk about athletics. Some people who are very good leaders are outspoken. They're not afraid to tell people when something is wrong. So what Jordan Peterson is saying is to be more vocal. Now, if you watch his lectures, a lot of people will say that he's tyrannical in his approach, that he can be a little bit too cutthroat. And so, on one hand, that might offend some more sensitive people. But on the other hand, it's extremely effective. There's a reason why he's one of the most popular intellectuals, because he's exciting to listen to. Because when you listen to him, you know you're going to get the truth. You know that he's going to touch some subjects that are relatable, that he's not going to just skirt over some fluff, because anybody can do that. Anybody can, a 5-year-old can tell you what you want to hear. But does that get progress? Does that improve you? No. So moving on page 91, he goes on to say, how do you need to be spoken to? What do you need to take from people? What are you putting up with or pretending to like from duty or obligation? Consult your resentment. It's a revelatory emotion for all its pathology. It's part of an evil triad: arrogance, deceit, and resentment. Nothing causes more harm than this underworld trinity. But resentment always means one of two things. Either the resentful person is immature, in which case he or she should shut up, quit whining, and get on with it, or there is tyranny afoot, in which case the person subjugated has a moral obligation to speak up. Why? Because the consequence of remaining silent is worse. Of course, it's easier in the moment to stay silent and avoid conflict, but in the long term, that's deadly. When you have something to say, silence is a lie, and tyranny feeds on lies. When should you push back against oppression, despite the danger? When you start nursing secret fantasies of revenge, when your life is being poisoned and your imagination fills with the wish to devour and destroy. Now, I think that's one of the most important sentences in this whole chapter. All right, let me read it again. When should you push back against oppression, despite the danger? When you start nursing secret fantasies of revenge, when your life is being poisoned and your imagination fills with the wish to devour and destroy. Now, I want you to think about somebody who you've met, and we all know a few people who are extremely negative, extremely pessimistic, extremely jealous. Do those people usually go on to have successful, fulfilling lives? No, no, they don't, because they have been poisoned by their own secret fantasies of revenge. Instead of looking at certain scenarios as opportunities to learn and take some wisdom away from and then apply it to the next situations, hoping for a better outcome, certain people just give up on life. Maybe they didn't get the dates that they were looking for. Maybe they didn't hang out with the people that they wanted to. Maybe they didn't get to travel the world. Maybe they didn't get that GPA and the scholarship that they wanted to. Maybe they didn't have the opportunity to go work for the company they wanted to. And so they just start building up all of these negative views on life, just checking off everything that they didn't get, becoming extremely cynical. And this is why I mentioned in that last chapter that, as superficial as it might sound, there are some people that you have to willingly decide that you want nothing to do with any more than you absolutely have to, because those people are going to be toxic. They're going to try and tear you down to their level. And then all of a sudden, it's like putting on a new pair of glasses. You're going to start seeing life a little bit more dismally. You're going to start becoming a little bit more pessimistic. Okay, now realism is really good. You got to be realistic. But pessimistic is too much. So moving on page 92, he says, the infant is dependent on his parents for almost everything he needs. The child, the successful child, can leave his parents, or at least temporarily, and make friends. He gives up a little of himself to do that, but gains much in return. The successful adolescent must take that process to its logical conclusion. He has to leave his parents and become like everyone else. He has to integrate with the group so he can transcend his childhood dependency. Once integrated, the successful adult then must learn how to just be the right amount different from everyone else. Be cautious when you're comparing yourself to others. You're a singular being. Once you're an adult, you have your own particular specific problems, financial, intimate, psychological, and otherwise. Those are embedded in the unique, broader context of your existence. Your career or job works for you in a personal manner, or it does not, and it does so in a unique interplay with the other specifics of your life. You must decide how much of your time to spend on this, how much on that. You must decide what to let go and what to pursue. Again, so he's asking his audience to reflect, to be selfish enough to say, this is what I want. And then you understand that there are going to be a lot of things that you're not going to get. Your life is not going to be perfect. But the fact that you are coming up with distinct goals that are individual to you, not based on what anybody else wants from you. You know, your parents, they wanted you to become something. You know, the people you grew up with, they went on their own life journey, and you might have been influenced to do something similar. There are all these different factors that come into play. But the one thing that's going to destroy you is if you do not be honest to yourself, because resentment will catch up to you. You know, you think about parents who have children at a young age, that might be a cause for disaster later on. Okay, they're not completely, maybe that's a little bit too extreme. Let me clarify what I mean by that. Because if you have a child at, say, 18 years old, you didn't have a chance to go out into the world and be kind of reckless, to try new things out, to, you know, go on a journey of self-discovery. And so you might be a little bit resentful of that child later on because you might feel as though you were held back. And that happens a lot. And it's the parent's decision to have that child. So you would think that there wouldn't be resentment, but there is. And I think there always will be resentment to a certain degree, especially under those circumstances, and especially if that child goes on to have a very successful life, because that child will then have reached a higher level within the hierarchy than that parent. So the whole point of this is to do what is right for you for as long as it takes, so that you will minimize the potential for resentment in the future. Moving forward on page 93, he says, the first step, perhaps, is to take stock. Who are you? When you buy a house and prepare to live in it, you hire an inspector to list all its faults, as it is in reality now, not as you wish it could be. You'll even pay him for the bad news. You need to know. You need to discover the home's hidden flaws. You need to know whether they are cosmetic imperfections or structural inadequacies. You need to know because you can't fix something if you don't know it's broken, and you're broken. You need an inspector. The internal critic, it could play that role. If you could get it on track, if you could cooperate, it could help you take stock, but you must walk through your psychological house with it and listen judiciously to what it says. Maybe you're a handyman's dream, a real fixer-upper. How can you start your own renovations without being demoralized, even crushed, by your internal critic's lengthy and painful reports of your inadequacies? Here's a hint. The future is like the past, but there's a crucial difference. The past is different, but the future, it could be better. It could be better some precise amount, the amount that can be achieved, perhaps in a day, with some minimal engagement. The present is eternally flawed, but where you might not be as important as the direction you are heading. Perhaps happiness is always to be found in the journey uphill, and not in the fleeting sense of satisfaction awaiting at the next peak. Much of happiness is hope, no matter how deep the underworld in which that hope was conceived. Called upon properly, the internal critic will suggest something to set in order, which you could set in order, which you would set in order voluntarily, without resentment, even with pleasure. Ask yourself, is there one thing that exists in disarray in your life or your situation that you could and would set straight? Could you and would you fix that one thing that announces itself humbly in need of repair? Could you do it now? Imagine that you are someone with whom you must negotiate. Imagine further that you are lazy, touchy, resentful, and hard to get along with. With that attitude, it's not going to be easy to get you moving. You might have to do you might have to use a little charm and playfulness. Excuse me, you might say to yourself without irony or sarcasm. I'm trying to reduce some of the unnecessary suffering around here. I could use some help. Keep the derision at bay. I'm wondering if there is something that you would be willing to do. I'd be very grateful for your service. Ask honestly and with humility. That's no simple matter. You might have to negotiate further, depending on your state of mind. Maybe you don't trust yourself. You think that you'll ask yourself for one thing and, having delivered, immediately demand more. And you'll be punitive and hurtful about it. And you'll denigrate what was already offered. Who wants to work for a tyrant like that? Not you. That's why you don't do what you want yourself to do. You're a bad employee, but a worse boss. Maybe you need to say to yourself, okay, I know we haven't gotten along very well in the past. I'm sorry about that. I'm trying to improve. I'll probably make some more mistakes along the way, but I'll try to listen if you object. I'll try to learn. I noticed just now today that you weren't really jumping at the opportunity to help when I asked. Is there something I could offer in return for your cooperation? Maybe if you did the dishes, we could go for coffee. You like espresso? How about espresso? Maybe a double shot. Or is there something else you want? Then you could listen. Maybe you'll hear a voice instead. Maybe it's even the voice of a long lost child. Maybe it will reply, really? You really want to do something nice for me? You really want to do it? It's not a trick? That is where you must be careful. That little voice, that's the voice of someone once burnt and twice shy. So you could say very carefully, really, I might not do it very well, and I might not be great company, but I will do it for you, I promise. A little careful kindness goes a long way, and judicious reward is a powerful motivator. Then you could take that small bit of yourself by the hand and do the damn dishes. And then you better not go clean the bathroom and forget about the coffee or the movie or the beer, or it will be even harder to call those unforgotten parts of yourself forth from the nooks and crannies of the underworld. You might ask yourself, what could I do to say someone else, my friend, my brother, my boss, my assistant, what would set things a bit more right between us tomorrow? What bit of chaos might I eradicate at home, on my desk, in my kitchen, tonight, so that the stage could be set for a better play? What snakes might I banish from the closet in my mind? 500 small decisions, 500 tiny actions compose your day today and every day. Could you aim one or two of these at a better result? Better in your own private opinion, by your own individual standards. Could you compare your specific personal tomorrow with your specific personal yesterday? Could you use your own judgment and ask yourself what that better tomorrow might be? So I think it's interesting there. Dr. Jordan Peterson is having a bit of internal dialogue with himself. He's sort of playing the boss or the mentor role to himself. The way I like to think of this is, what if life was a movie and you were an actor? And throughout life, you're going to have different roles. You're going to have to display certain parts of your personality, of your characteristics, to get an up on the environment. How would you act in certain situations if the camera was on you? Would you be the star of the movie, or would you be a supporting actor or actress? How would you want others to remember you? So on page 98, he goes on to say, there's a profound idea in the ancient Vedic texts, the oldest scriptures of Hinduism and part of the bedrock of Indian culture. The world as perceived is Maya, appearance or illusion. This means in part that people are blinded by their desires as well as merely incapable of seeing things as they truly are. This is true in a sense that transcends the metaphorical. Your eyes are tools. They are there to help you get what you want. The price you pay for that utility, that specific, focused direction, is blindness to everything else. This doesn't matter so much when things are going well and we are getting what we want, although it can be a problem even then because getting what we want currently can make us blind to higher callings. But all that ignored world presents a truly terrible problem when we're in crisis, and nothing whatsoever is turning out the way we want it to. Then there can be far too much to deal with. Happily, however, that problem contains within it seeds of its own solution. Since you've ignored so much, there is plenty of possibility left where you have not yet looked. And again, I think it's very important what he's saying is to continuously reflect. You know, in the example of a college student or just somebody who's young and they started their career, it can be easy to get into groupthink and to think more about what other people think of you. And then eventually you might notice that you are not where you want to be in life because you weren't reflecting on what you wanted. You were reflecting on how are you going to fit in? How are you going to be a certain people according to other people? And so that's a sign of immaturity. That's a sign of self-consciousness, of insecurities. So be honest with yourself. And sometimes that takes the wisdom of looking forward and thinking of, if I'm 80 years old, what am I truly going to care about? Am I really going to care that I didn't do these things? Or am I going to regret that I did some more of these things? What are you going to really value? Imagine that you're unhappy. You're not getting what you need. Perversely, this may be because of what you want. You are blind because of what you desire. Perhaps what you really need is right in front of your eyes, but you cannot see it because of what you are currently aiming for. And that brings us to something else. The price that must be paid before you or anyone can get what they want, or better yet, what they need. Think about it this way. You look at the world in your particular idiosyncratic manner. You use a set of tools to screen most things out and let some things in. You have spent a lot of time building those tools. They've become habitual. They're not mere abstract thoughts. They're built right into you. They orient you in the world. They're your deepest and often implicit and unconscious values. They've become part of your biological structure. They're alive, and they don't want to disappear or transform or die. But sometimes their time has come and new things need to be born. For this reason, although not only for this reason, it is necessary to let things go during the journey uphill. If things are not going well for you, well, that might be because, as the most cynical of aphorisms has it, life sucks, and then you die. Before your crisis impels you to that hideous conclusion, however, you might consider the following. Life doesn't have the problem. You do. At least that realization leaves you with some options. If your life is not going well, perhaps it is your current knowledge that is insufficient, not life itself. Perhaps your value structure needs some serious retooling. Perhaps what you want is blinding you to what else could be. Perhaps you are holding on to your desires in the present so tightly that you cannot see anything else, even what you truly need. Imagine that you are thinking enviously, I should have my boss's job. If your boss sticks to his post stubbornly and competently, thoughts like that will lead you into a state of irritation, unhappiness, and disgust. You might realize this. You think, I am unhappy. However, I could be cured of this unhappiness if I could just fulfill my ambition. But then you might think further. Wait, you think, maybe I'm not unhappy because I don't have my boss's job. Maybe I'm unhappy because I can't stop wanting that job. That doesn't mean you can't just, that doesn't mean you can just simply and magically tell yourself to stop wanting that job and then listen and transform. You won't, can't. In fact, just change yourself that easily. You have to dig deeper. You must change what you want. That's important. I think a lot of people will see people in positions of authority and they'll say, I want that position. But there's underlying motivations for why they want that. So somebody might see a movie star, for example, and say, I want that position. But you have to ask yourself, why do you want that position? Do you want it because that person is getting a lot of attention? So then you're wanting that position because they have a lot of people who are focused on them. But then you are blind to the realities of their life. So you say, I want to become that person. So you aim at that objective and you work day and night for it to become it. But what you don't realize is the real life that they live. You only see a small portion of that. Or you might say, I want to be an athlete because they make a lot of money. So then you're attaching your actions towards the motivation to make a lot of money. But then when the going gets tough and you start having to overcome these obstacles, you realize that you didn't really want it. You just wanted the money. But you could have went for another objective and gotten enough money to fulfill your desire, but you could have been happy along the way. So to say that you want something for just one motivating factor and ignoring everything else is a recipe for disaster, which many people fall victim to. So another reason why, some women might want to be a model is because that model looks a certain way and it reminds them of some insecurities that they have. And so they might say, my life would be better if I was a model. But that's not possible. They're not being realistic with themselves. So they're shooting for a goal that's never going to happen. It's like the person who goes on American Idol whose voice is terrible, but they went for a goal that didn't align with who they were. You see, they were going after something because of how everybody else viewed them, but they weren't being realistic and asking themselves if that was something they really wanted. But maybe they did really want it and they just weren't talented. Or maybe they just did it because they wanted the attention and they wanted other people to view them in a certain way. But then that's where you get to a certain point where you realize that the actions you took were not in alignment to the end goal that you wanted. And so you spent a lot of time on things that were just mainly for the approval of other people. Engaging in attention seeking behavior distracted you from going your own way. Yeah, and that's all I'm going to read from this chapter. He goes on to talk about the correlation between the Bible and people's everyday lives and learning from the principles in that Bible. I think it's important, if you read the rest of this chapter, to know that religion is simply a story. It's a story to teach you and guide you the proper fundamentals of life. But what you'll realize is the God consciousness, the real savior that you're looking after, is within yourself. And so we talked about that in a few videos before. If you have not, I would recommend you go back and watch those videos. And I'm explaining how it all works. Okay, because I'm going to be really blunt here and say that the reason why people get into religion is because they're weak-minded. They are not accepting the reality of life. So they were seeking another entity, another force of nature to guide them because they're being weak. They're praying up in the sky, looking up in the sky. Somebody save me, because I'm too damn useless to save myself. And that is not to belittle anybody, that's to help you. And Jordan Peterson is trying to help you too. And reading this book is going to help you, because it's going to help you to open your eyes up, reflect on some personal things, and realize that it's you. Take it easy. I'll see you next time.